Past and present Gamestop employees, what are your best cringe stories? We had a woman come in with a $200 return that was like 9 months outside of the return policy, but she explained that her sister had asked her to come and return these things because her sister had gotten in a horrific car accident and lost both of her legs and had been unable to return the items within the return policy. So we decided to be nice and grant the return, even though it was so far out of the policy and most of the items had gone down in price considerably. The woman ended up buying several new games for her nephew, the legless sister's son, and several items for her own son with the money. A couple weeks later she comes back and wants to return the new games, even though they've been opened and played and are now also outside of the return policy. She said her sister was upset that she returned $200 plus worth of stuff and her son only got a couple games out of it. The customer likely left out that she had spent some of the money to buy games for her own child. We explained to the woman that it was outside of the policy and the new games had been opened and gotten a lot of use. But she threw it in our face that we had gone against the return policy last time. Frick us. Right. So we were being cruel not to make another exception. The woman was being crappy with us. So we held firm. A line was forming at that point. Then the woman yells something like, "I can't believe you would be so cold-hearted. My sister lost her legs in an accident and you won't let us return these things that she bought only a couple weeks ago. My sister doesn't have her legs anymore. It's not her fault she couldn't return to the store in time." All of the customers look at me like I'm Satan. Some actually leave the store because they tell us they can't believe how callous we're being. We still didn't return the lady's stuff. Good for you for holding firm. What a terrible person this lady is, using someone else's disability to try and profit. Lots of kids think Gamestop is a hangout spot where I live, so they'll just loiter until it's time for them to leave. We attracted a lot of neckbeards too. When Skyrim was coming out, tons of kids were stoked for it, probably 10-15. And neckbeards would make it their mission to prove that they knew the entire history of Skyrim and that the kids weren't OG fans like them. A 20-year-old guy gets into an argument with a kid about how he didn't even begin to know about the game and he shouldn't buy it until he learned about all the lore. The kid just calmly says, "Dude, it's just a game, chill out." Never seen a grown man roll his eyes at a 12-year-old. Gatekeeping a 12-year-old. Guy must have a lot of friends. Fortunately, it's been long enough since I quit that I've forgotten many horrible moments. For me, the first specifically cringe moment that comes to mind was when this guy in a full forest green sweatsuit came in. I asked if he needed help finding anything and he said absolutely not. "I'm just here to see what the con 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 here to," who uses peasants unironically. I was an assistant manager at Gamestop during last generation's console release, like at the heart of the Wii release. So as I am working my shift, I constantly get people asking if we have Wiis and would have to either crush their dreams or make their day. Well, one day at least a week before Christmas, a mother came in asking if we had the Wii. I told her no, but did offer our phone number to give us a call anytime we are open to see if we have them in. She declines and exits the store. A few hours later, same lady comes in, but with her son this time, and says to him, "Do you see that man over there? He ruined your Christmas because he won't sell me a Wii." I freaking lost it. I told her to get out of my store and not blame her procrastination on me. I was trying so hard not to curse due to other customers in the store, but if I was able to go unfiltered I probably would have been fired. Worked from 0610. Microsoft had just put out Wi-Fi adapters for the XB360. Literally that day, magically, a guy turns up with 5 of them still in the boxes that he wants to sell to us. We refuse, citing the fact that they still are in the package. He walks outside the front door and rips one out of the package, while we watch, then comes back inside to sell it to us. We still refuse. He took off and went to another store, and managed to sell one to that store, then came back to us with the other 4, and tried to pitch a fit that we wouldn't take them because the other store did. Yeah, we are using every rule we can not to take in clearly stolen merchandise. There are 2 others that really stand out in my head. One was around Christmas time. Woman comes in with 3 kids, all about 11-13ish boys. They're initially just here for one game and a pre-order. While they're at the counter with me, the boys basically start tag teaming. One up with mom, the other 2 chatting in back. All 3 wore her down until she left with a brand new Xbox 360 and 4 games for it, and 2 extra controllers. Finally, we had a dysfunctional family of an older teenage boy, 16-18ish, who had a girlfriend, a younger boy, 8-10ish, and the mom. Older kid stole his little brother's games, came in, and traded them in to get whatever new hotness was out. About a week or 2 later, mom brings both boys in, with the girlfriend tagging along for girlfriend reasons, and tries to buy back all the games that the elder son sold. Not just the game, but like the specific cartridge or disc. She spent probably an hour trying to get this to work, and pleading with us to figure it out to give it back to her. We could only do that with a police report, until she basically rebought the games. Meanwhile, the older boy she dragged along stood in the corner with his GF and spent the entire time trying to round third base. Very slow Saturday night. Only had 1 client at that point. We were not near any major city, so it was calm more often than not. That client wanted to buy some expansion for The Sims on PS3. We didn't have any of those, and to this day I don't know if the physical copies even exist. Well, after telling him we didn't have it in stock, he talked about what he did in the game. As I can't be rude, I politely listened for the first 5-10 minutes. Problem is, guy started getting really into it. You'd think the guy would go on with his life after 15 minutes. Oh no, not him. He went on for a whole 4 hours, explaining to me in excruciating details how his house looked, how he killed his multiple families, incest stories, torturing babies, you name it. I had very few clients within that 4 hours to relieve me from this guy, and this was undoubtedly the longest 8-8 shift I've ever done. He went to his house only because I was vacuuming the shop and we were preparing to close. I've had a very passionate hatred for The Sims ever since. You encountered a wild counter monkey. Usually they keep to board game and hobby shops, but with fewer and fewer of those these days, they must travel ever further afield to find watering people to inflict their gaming stories upon. About 7 years ago, when the new Wii remotes were still fairly new, someone called asking about them. They had a really thick accent and were difficult to understand. I had to ask them to repeat everything several times to finally understand their questions that got a little more specific. Yes, we have the new Wii remotes in stock. Yes, they are the Wii Remote Pluses. Yes, we have them in several colors. Yes, they are the ones with the rumble feature. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't catch that. Can you repeat your question? I must have asked him 5 times to repeat his last question because I just could not understand what he was saying. I could catch bits and pieces and slowly was able to understand him better each time until finally I successfully heard. It doesn't vibrate anymore after I put it up my rectum. Do you ever stick the remotes up your rectum to enjoy the vibrations? He was definitely trolling me, or at a minimum was trying to get me all flustered for his own enjoyment. I just pretended like I still couldn't understand what he was saying and had him repeat himself about 10 more times, before listing off their price and all the different colors we had and eventually hanging up on him when he kept asking if I like to stick Wii remotes up my butt. Seasonal GS worker. Guy walks in, looks around, asks where the PS4 Pros are. I tell him that we don't have any more. Guy casually takes out a huge wad of bills, just starts to mess around with it while talking to me. Guy, you don't have any in the back? Me, nope. I notice that most of the bills are $1s and $5s, but we are getting more tomorrow and we can pre-order them now for you. Do you want one? Guy just looks at me for 30 seconds, then turns around and leaves. That guy needs to upgrade his bribing skills. Store manager and employee for nearly 10 years. I took a transfer to a store in a lower income area to be a store manager in training. First day, a school day, mind you. These 2 kids about 7 and 9 come in and start playing on the demo units and looking around. My boss comes in and he steps in something on the way to the back room to put his stuff away. Turns out the younger one crap on the floor, then apparently wiped his butt like a dog on the carpet. That was my cue. And I told him I'm going to lunch now, and wondered what the heck I just accepted to transfer into. As I'm coming back from lunch, I see the kids being rather forcefully kicked out of the store. Turns out they went home, cleaned up the little boy, came back, and he proceeded to pee all over the PS3 demo unit. I have a lot of other memories, but that was by far the grossest. Continue. During my employment with Gamestop, I had a regular who would come in literally every day. After a couple months of working, I noticed he was coming in twice or 3 times a day. I talked to my coworkers about it and apparently he would come in, ask if I was there and then leave if I wasn't. I would often run into him at restaurants, the grocery store, the mall, the park, pretty much anywhere. It was a town of 30k people, so I thought whatever, I guess it's a small enough town for that to happen. Well, one morning when I was receiving shipment, he comes in and we're chatting. He mentioned something about how he memorized my license plate so he could tell when I was working so he didn't have to bother my coworkers. I joked about how that must be how we keep running into each other, and he admitted he would look around town for my car when I wasn't working. He asked me out a few times and I turned him down every time, straight up telling him I wasn't interested. After that he cancelled all of his pre-orders through me. It counted against me and I got written up on multiple occasions for not meeting my goals because of this, and would always give me awful surveys. It was pretty upsetting. So I started leaving my car at home so my numbers wouldn't suffer. But then he started showing up at my house and just hung out in the lot across the street. Sometimes he would apologize for making me look bad at work, then would offer to take me out to make up for it. I'd tell him no, and he'd get mad again. After a couple months of using Uber and hiding in my house, I ended up moving, transferring stores and changing my plates in case he was ever in town. I want to believe you could have gotten a restraining order because he was clearly stalking you, but somehow I just know they'd say it wasn't bad enough to justify one. For a while at my local Gamestop, the head manager was this pretty girl. She was constantly being hit on by most of the male customers despite the fact she was married at the time. My favorite moment was this guy was hitting on the head manager while again I assume his young son was looking at Xbox 360 games. She shot him down and he turns to his son and says, "Hurry up and pick. Your mom's waiting in the car." Whoa. Not an employee, but one time when in there a kid was trying to persuade his mom to buy him Saints Row 3. The employee was being grilled by the mom asking all these questions and the employee was trying to explain to her why it wasn't an appropriate game for her kid, but was clearly uncomfortable explaining why. There was only one employee and I was impatient to get out with my purchase, so I told her why exactly it was not an appropriate game for her kid. "You can beat people to death with a 3-foot-long purple dildo in that game." She immediately turned on her kid for telling her that it was way less violent and graphic than GTA and dragged her kid out of the store. Me and the employee had a good laugh. I had two neckbuds get into a slap fight over PS2 versus GameCube. They got winded quickly and I could not declare a winner. I had another where a customer was playing Street Fighter 2 on the 360 demo unit. One of my employees was a professional fighting game player and was ranked very highly at the time. He asks if he can join but jokingly asked this kid to take it easy. He looks my guy up and down and in the nerdiest voice possible snorts and says request denied. So my buddy lets this kid whoop his butt in the first round and says, "Man, you're pretty good," and was going to let it go at that, but the kid tells him that he sucks at fighting games. My employee decides to unleash heck on him and demolishes the kid, who told us he was going to tell on us to the manager, who was I. I had two neckbuds get into a slap fight over PS2 versus GameCube. They got winded quickly and I could not declare a winner. This might be my favorite one of these so far. I worked at a GameStop about 12 years ago. In front of my store was a bus stop that had stops to questionable locales that always brought in a strange crowd. I have two very fond memories of working there. The first is a story of a generally normal looking lady. Everything seemed fine as I greeted her and asked if she needed any help. The typical "I'm just browsing," as she proceeded to check out games on the wall. 5 minutes go by. I'm browsing things on my phone. I look up to see the woman pulling pieces of fried chicken from her purse, eating them as she browsed. That's when I noticed the Golden Corral, an American buffet, paper cup in hand. I can only assume that she went over to the corral across the street and stole a boatload of chicken using her pews as a container. There was no plastic bag in her purse as far as I could see, just chicken on purse action. She was using the same hand to grab games and eat chicken, a trail of grease and breading laid in her path. The second story is of a gentleman who tried to trade in his GameCube, but forgot to take his crack rocks out of the disc tray. I quickly closed the lid and handed it back to him. saying I couldn't accept his trade. Of course he was furious, demanding why. After telling him to open the lid, he got a huge grimace on his face, gave me a high five and said good looking out brother before leaving my store. Note, sorry for any mistakes. At work on my phone typing this up. I don't know what's funnier, that he was selling his GamerCube for more crack because he was out, or that he forgot he lost his crack in it in the first place. The release of the Xbox 360 was really painful. We had hundreds of pre-orders right before release. Based on what I heard, Microsoft decides to do a global release instead of just the USA, so we won't be getting the amount of consoles we were promised that day. And for the next few weeks, people who were promised a console kept calling and coming in to complain. We had nothing to give them, and then all the released consoles started breaking, and customers needed replacements. We had none. It was a mess. Not very cringy, I guess, but it certainly made me cringe back in the day. I remember that crap. It was horrible. Christian of Sonichu fame was a regular. Every time he showed up was cringe. We would have to endure his inane banter for a good hour or so before he would move on. I ended up leaving for college right before his legend really took off, but people constantly warned me about him. He was easy enough to feign interest in and tune out back then for me, so my coworkers would find ways to get him talking to me. He was heck on the quotas since he would interrupt anyone trying to get between him and finishing his rant for that day, so I would just call someone else to handle customers and stock shelves to wait him out. There were small kids who were worse than he was, but he would always be there every few days. If only I knew what I do now, then I might have paid attention to some of his rants, but I had no idea. Other than that, it was mostly having to deal with crappy parents, know-it-all game nerds, customers causing messes, loud kids, bad thieves, or the rare celebrity looking for the latest game while visiting the area on tour. Best friend is a Gamestop employee. Before they announced they were really releasing Battletoads, had probably like a 10 or 11-year-old kid call, asked if he could buy Battletoads. This is a common prank that used to be pulled when Gamestop employees. Well, she's been through this before with someone else, so her response was, sure do, I will just charge the $80 to the account associated with this phone number and you can come pick it up anytime. Well, the kid started freaking out because it was his mom's phone and immediately apologized to him. It was a joke and he would never do it again. That's pretty clever. Edit. Wickedness game BTW. Edit. Yes, I did. Several times a week this guy in his early 20s would come into the store on his break. Same time of day every time when we were dead and no one was in the store. We had the strategy guides displayed in the space below the registers. Every time this guy would come in, I would greet him without all the trades, pre-order crap, and just ask him how it was going. He would love up from the strategy guide he was reading, look me dead in my face, and not say a word, ever. I probably saw him 50 times over the course of working there. He never bought anything and he never said a word to me. Most awkward time of my life. So much cringe, but nothing tops. A middle-aged guy came in, asked for my help picking out a present for his son, and began creepily hitting on me. 20F at the time. I put him off as politely as I could, rang him up, and glanced down at the name on the credit card. It was my ex-boyfriend's dad, who was still married to my ex-boyfriend's mom, until a while later, when they got divorced because, surprise, he was screwing other women. The kicker, years later, I married that ex-boyfriend, who stopped speaking to his father after the divorce. So the only interaction I've ever had with my child's grandfather was when he tried to cheat on my mother-in-law with me. Okay, that plot twist was better than an M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong movie. I worked at Game a few years ago, which seems to basically be the UK's equivalent of GameStop. We had these people come in and buy a brand new PS4. All seemed fine. About an hour or two later they were back, asking for a refund, saying that the PS4 was faulty. We get it out, and inside the box is an obviously used, broken PS4. We said no, this isn't the console we sold you. It was obvious they had taken out the new PS4 and replaced it with an old broken one and were trying to scam us into giving them the refund so they'd have the money and a new PS4. They were arguing until they were blue in the face that no, this was what was in the box. We sold them a broken product. There were many shoutings of the customer is always right and then threats. starting off threatening to report us for not giving them a refund and then threats bordering on violence. Thing is, we logged the serial numbers of sold new consoles. When we showed them the serial number on their receipt, and the box did not match the serial number on the console, they suddenly just grabbed it all back and ran. A coworker and I are in the store chatting while shelving games. There was also a customer who had been in the store for several minutes while trying to decide on a game. My coworker was talking about getting a Zelda tattoo, so I kept coming up with increasingly cheesy suggestions. A massive Hylian shield across his entire back, a fairy behind his ear, that sort of thing. I eventually told him he should get a glow-in-the-dark Triforce segment on his hand, which we laughed at. Several weeks later that customer is in a game and I'm ringing him up. He starts talking to me about how much of a Zelda fan he is. Then he says something like, "I was telling my girlfriend about this awesome tattoo idea I came up with. You see, they make this special glow-in-the-dark ink now." This guy totally starts to recite my own cheesy tattoo idea back to me. I thought he was kidding at first, so I was like, "Oh, that's right. You were in here a few weeks ago when we were joking about tattoos." But the guy gets a deer in headlights look and quickly denies that he was there for that conversation before scurrying out of the store. TLDR. Customer tried to pass off my own bad tattoo idea as his own. It would be kind of cool to get something like that done in UV ink. Not glow in the dark, but it'd be mostly invisible until you shine UV light on it and prove that you're the savior of Hyrule. This is my go-to story whenever I tell one. I was counting the money after closing. Doors locked. Bars down. Fattest ginger 11-year-old I've ever seen comes up to the door and pulls on the handle. No go. It's locked. He then proceeds to put all 200 pounds of his on both handles, pulling like the world depended on it. He angrily pushes off, throws his hands back and screams at the moon, punches the metal frame of the door, grabs his hand in pain, waddles off. Yes, I was across from a liquor store. We had some drunks do that stuff from time to time. Good stuff. One of the stores I had worked at had a lot of military customers because we were in a military base. I love and respect our soldiers. They work hard and deserve some downtime. That said, this officer, in uniform, comes in to trade in some merchandise. He had quite a few games and accessories. Part of the trade-in process is checking condition, which can take time and results in small talk. As I'm checking his stuff, I ask him where he got his games, as I was curious to see if he was a regular Gamestop customer or if I needed to talk to him about the membership card. He says he got them from someone. Now, by law, we couldn't take in product that wasn't being traded by the owner. I asked if they belonged to a friend, as I would need that person to trade the items in. This is where it got weird. He proceeded to tell me that his platoon was deployed, so he went into their rooms and took their stuff to sell. I was shocked. I asked him if he meant that they had asked him to trade it while they were gone. Nope. He said they didn't know. I told him that I couldn't take stolen merchandise. He wanted to know why not. As I tried to explain it to him, he said he didn't understand. He said that since he had gone and taken the stuff, it was now in his possession, thereby his, and he can do what he wants with it. After repeated attempts to explain it, I just called the MPs. He waited patiently, and when the MPs arrived, the guy and I explained everything and they took him away. Found out the guy had hundreds of dollars of trade credit from doing this before. We ended up getting corporate to freeze his card and I had to give a statement to the base command. Never found out if he got any reprimand or anything. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.